Rob Tebbutt here for One-on-One Boxing, and today we're going to be looking back at the fight everyone is talking about. Tyson Fury's split decision win over Francis Ngannou this past weekend in Saudi Arabia that made headlines around the world. Okay, and where else to start but at that knockdown? Francis Ngannou producing one of the biggest shocks in the history of not only boxing, of not only combat sports, but of all sports, by dropping the reigning WBC and lineal heavyweight champion of the world, Tyson Fury, in his professional debut, no less, in that third round this past weekend in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. The whole world stood by and watched as Tyson Fury, the unbeaten Tyson Fury, the lineal champion, the WBC champion, was dropped by a man making his professional boxing debut. Francis Ngannou, of course, as we know, one of the biggest stars in MMA history, one of the biggest stars in UFC history, but made his professional debut this weekend in a fight that myself, that everybody else assumed would be one-sided, that Tyson Fury would just have too much ability, too much seasoning, and too much experience in the squared circle against Francis Ngannou. And I don't expect it to be in any way competitive whatsoever. Everybody thought that Fury might take a round, might take two, just to give the impression that this was a competitive fight. But I think it was very, very obvious from that first bell that Francis Ngannou may have been kidding us along all the while with those pad work videos where he looked like he'd never picked up his hands to throw them in any direction before. But on the night, he was calm, he was reserved, and from that opening bell, you could just tell that Francis Ngannou hadn't turned up on the night to make up the numbers. Now, people can look at Tyson Fury and say he wasn't this, he wasn't that, he was underprepared, he overlooked Francis Ngannou. Now, while those may be true, you can only beat what's put in front of you on the night, and that's what Francis Ngannou went out to do from that first round. Fury came out, landed the right hand a few times in that first round. I think he was just trying to establish dominance on Francis Ngannou and let him know that he can land that right hand at any time he pleased, and he did. He landed the right hand 4 or 5 times in the first round, Tyson Fury. But what for me was one of the most impressive things was the fact that Francis Ngannou, not once did he get flustered, not once did he throw one of those wild overhand rights that many people had expected him to do at the weekend. He was calm, he was collected, he didn't lose track of what he was in the ring to do and stayed calm throughout. Now, I think that may have spooked Tyson Fury a little bit. I think Fury went out there and thought, look, I'll hit this guy, and if he's still standing, he'll know that he can't walk forward and walk through me. But Ngannou just wasn't having it. He wasn't playing ball. Everybody expected Ngannou to go in, be wild for a round or two, then start blowing out, and then ultimately get knocked out by Tyson Fury. But that just didn't happen. Ngannou think he may have played us all, and I don't expect it to be in any way competitive whatsoever. It kind of had that old George Foreman style about him, with the hands up and blocking and catching and countering. He was coming forward, he was going back, he was orthodox, he was southpaw, he showed a great chin, he showed a great temperament. For me, it has to be one of, if not the greatest professional boxing debuts in history. Now, I don't say that lightly. We've seen over the years amazing things happen, but have we ever seen a man come from a different sport into professional boxing, take on the consensus #1 in the world, the baddest man on the planet, Tyson Fury, and really give him hell from the opening round right the way to the end of the fight? Now, of course, since the fight, there's been a lot of controversy, a lot of talk around the decision, whether or not Francis Ngannou was robbed. For me, I don't think there could be a robbery in that fight. I felt the fight was very, very close. At the time, I had it 5 rounds apiece, with Francis Ngannou getting the nod by 1 point due to that knockdown in the third round. When I rewatched it, I had Tyson Fury winning 6 rounds to 4 to give him a 1-point win on the scorecard. So I think either way, looking at that fight, a point to Fury, a point to Ngannou, I think is about right. But even that, when you consider Francis Ngannou's lack of experience, is a massive win, not only for Ngannou, but for the whole MMA community.
The guys who throw punches can't throw a punch to save their ass.
Now, while I think it's only right to focus on the positives from Francis Ngannou and what a wonderful performance that was, we have to look at Tyson Fury and say that this was not the Tyson Fury that we saw in the second Deontay Wilder fight. This is not the Tyson Fury we saw all of those years ago against Vladimir Klitschko. This wasn't even the Tyson Fury that we saw a year ago against Derek Chisora. Now, was that him overlooking Francis Ngannou? I think you have to say yes. I mean, Tyson Fury's come out afterwards and said, you know, I took everything seriously. He was very magnanimous and gave a lot of credit to Francis Ngannou, but you have to think that a switched on Tyson Fury, somebody who's really, really concentrated, just wouldn't have performed like that at the weekend. It looked like Fury didn't really have that much confidence in what he was doing. Certainly after that first round, when the right hands started bouncing off Francis Ngannou's chin and he was still there, Fury was unable to manhandle Ngannou in the clinch, which is something that we've seen Fury do, particularly later on in his career, getting that big 6'9" frame over people and getting them to take his weight and tiring them out and ultimately bullying them on the inside. It was very, very obvious from the first time the two men exchanged and clinched that that wasn't going to happen. Francis Ngannou, with that wrestling background, with that MMA background, just wasn't playing ball, was very, very cute and very clever on the inside with finding little areas and just touching Fury to head and body. And you could tell, you could see on Tyson Fury's face that Francis Ngannou was clearly a very heavy-handed man, but he wasn't loading up. He wasn't swinging from the fences like we all expected him to do, like we've seen him do in MMA. It was a calculated, confident and professional performance from Francis Ngannou, and it took the world by storm. Francis Ngannou now arguably the most marketable combat sports athlete in the world at the minute. How you can go from being the UFC heavyweight champion and then go 10 rounds and arguably, in some people's cases, beat Tyson Fury in your professional boxing debut. Francis Ngannou has superseded everybody's expectations, probably apart from his own, and now is a big player in the heavyweight division in boxing. Now, if you'd have said that to me just a few days ago, I would have thought you were absolutely crazy. I thought there was no way Francis Ngannou could go 10 rounds with Tyson Fury, much less drop Tyson Fury and come close to getting a win on the scorecards. Remember, it was a split decision. Francis Ngannou on one of the cards won the fight, and I don't expect it to be in any way competitive whatsoever. A professional boxing judge had Francis Ngannou defeating the heavyweight champion of the world in his professional boxing debut. Just let that sink in. His professional debut, he's gotten 10 rounds with a guy who's been boxing since he could stand up in Tyson Fury, a guy who's beaten Vladimir Klitschko, who's beaten Deontay Wilder, has beaten a host of other heavyweight contenders, but he really never looked comfortable at all in there, Tyson Fury, when faced with Francis Ngannou. I felt that Ngannou paced himself well throughout the fight. He backed off Tyson Fury and was countering him, which was something that nobody could have ever expected to happen on the night. We all thought that Ngannou would come forward, bull in a china shop and run Fury over, or certainly try to run Fury over, but that Fury would just be too slick and too well schooled for Francis Ngannou, and that just wasn't the case on the night. We've seen Fury since with a black eye, with a cut on his head. Francis Ngannou coming out of the fight relatively unscathed, and of course now sets his sights on returning to the squared circle and getting another big fight under his belt. And who could argue against seeing it? For me, I want to see Francis Ngannou in there with the big names at heavyweight. I don't see Ngannou dropping down and trying to build a career and get some experience. Remember, he is 37 years of age now. He's 0-1, having had one professional fight, but is still arguably now the biggest name in the division. So I want to see Francis Ngannou locking up with another one of those big boys. I don't want to see Ngannou fight somebody in the top 25 or top 30 that maybe look a little bit less impressive, and then it suddenly slows down that Ngannou hype train. Get him in there with a Deontay Wilder. Get him in there with an Anthony Joshua and Alexander Usyk. A Zhilei Zhang fight in Beijing in the Bird's Nest Stadium would be a massive spectacle. So while Tyson Fury emerged victorious this past weekend via split decision, I think it's fair to say that Francis Ngannou won the story of the fight and has emerged as the real winner this past weekend in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Now, who knows what happens in the heavyweight division? We were all expecting Tyson Fury and Alexander Usyk to square off, to face off, and to confirm their undisputed heavyweight title bout on December the 23rd in Riyadh. But after those hard, grueling 10 rounds, and they were hard, grueling rounds for Tyson Fury, it looks as though we're going to have to wait a little bit longer for that undisputed heavyweight title bout. I don't think December the 23rd is now going to happen, and we may be looking at the first half of 2024 before we see Tyson Fury and Alexander Usyk get in the ring again. Now, I think it's fair to say nobody could have predicted Tyson Fury to be dropped by Francis Ngannou and really look a long way away from his best. You'd have to assume that Tyson Fury, as we've seen in the past in some of his less impressive performances, will pick it up for the big one for Alexander Usyk if they do get that undisputed title bout over the line and ready for next year. But after that, you're probably looking at Alexander Usyk now, if you were backing Tyson Fury before, and looking at Usyk and thinking, you know what? He could have that chance now. The size advantage may not be too vast for Alexander Usyk. Have we seen Tyson Fury now at his best? Is he on the decline as a fighter, or was this past weekend just a byproduct of Fury maybe overlooking Francis Ngannou, maybe looking ahead to that showdown with Alexander Usyk, and quite simply Francis Ngannou just being a little bit or a lot better than what we expected him to be on the night? One thing's for sure, it has thrown a massive wrench in things in the heavyweight division. All of the naysayers before the fight, myself included, who said that it wasn't going to be a competitive spectacle, now have egg on their faces. Francis Ngannou is real. He is a heavyweight contender, and that is not just hyperbole. He has gone 10 rounds and arguably defeated the heavyweight champion of the world, dropping him in spectacular fashion in that third round and really not looking out of place at all. So when you consider everything that we saw this past weekend in Saudi Arabia, the glitz, the glamour, the spectacle, Cristiano Ronaldo in one side of the building, Eminem and Kanye West on the other side of the building, and when you consider the biggest talking point of the year in the heavyweight division has emerged from this past weekend, and Francis Ngannou has become a big player in the sport, I think maybe the event was a success. I think it probably depends on whether or not you are a boxing fan or not, or whether or not you see this as a big slap in the face for the sport. Personally, I don't. I think this is a much needed injection of energy into the heavyweight division and the sport as a whole. And I think Francis Ngannou has still got plenty of mileage left in him, and we're going to see him in a big fight sometime soon. So that was my Fury and Ngannou review. Will we see Tyson Fury move on now to box Alexander Usyk? Will we see Francis Ngannou get himself another big fight in the heavyweight division? Let us know in the comments who you want to see next for Francis Ngannou, and whether or not we'll see Tyson Fury versus Alexander Usyk next. But from me, Rob Tebbutt, here on One-on-One Boxing, that's all we've got time for. Thanks very much for watching, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.